Okay. Should be ready to go, Senator.
Thank you, Jen. Welcome, everyone, on another snowy Tuesday here in New Hampshire. I am Senator Sharon Carson, and I represent Senate District 14, comprising towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. And today we will be holding a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Judiciary Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that 1, we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and/or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. 2, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. 3, we are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remote.senate@leg.state.newhampshire.us or call area code 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. 5, please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. 6, finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I will call the roll. Senator Gannon.
Senator Gannon and sunny Sandown, not sunny today. I have 2 Timberlane Zoom students who may or may not walk through, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Senator French.
Harold French, Senate District number 7. I'm in my office in Concord, New Hampshire, that I share with Attorney Sullivan, and he is in the office at this time and be in and out.
Thank you. Senator Khan.
Present in Keene. My wife is elsewhere in the house.
Okay, thank you. Senator Whitley.
Good afternoon, Senator Becky Whitley here in my house in Hopkinton. I'm alone in the room, but my family is in the house.
And Senator Carson, I am at my home in Londonderry. I am currently alone, but my daughter, I'm sure, is going to be coming through at some point in time. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on Senate Bill 110 and recognize the prime sponsor, Senator Tom Sherman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I feel a little bit like deja vu all over again, seeing Senator French and Senator Gannon again. It seems like just yesterday that we
We're everywhere.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am State Senator Tom Sherman, representing District 24, the 11 towns along the seacoast. And I am introducing SB 110, and it is an act relative to animals in motor vehicles. And as you may recall, this was brought to my attention by a wonderful high school student from Newcastle named Olivia Hammer, who I believe will be able to testify talking about her concerns. But really, bringing up the issue of what do you do when you see an animal in distress in a car? How can you act? And be sure that you are acting in a safe way and that you are really acting to protect the animal. And in last year's iteration, I think it was last year's iteration, we did hear a lot of testimony about some of the dangers of releasing an animal, and that sometimes you don't know if they're in distress, and leaving that decision up to a Good Samaritan does present some risk, potentially even to the public. I worked with the American Kennel Club, and I worked and also with the prior Senate attorney, Senate counsel, and also with the Attorney General's office. And we came up with something that I don't think has ever been put forward in this type of legislation, which all of us know is legislation that keeps coming back. And I think that's because we have not really found a way to answer all of the different concerns, all the competing concerns. So this year's version, SB 110, takes a slightly different tact. And that is using the power of law enforcement to actually, quote, deputize, close quote, any citizen. If a law enforcement officer cannot get to the scene in time and an animal is in distress, this bill would allow an individual who is on the scene to take action to rescue a confined animal only if those actions were authorized by a law enforcement officer, and also that there was another person present to witness that deputization. This really does answer many of the concerns, and especially in an age where we are so digitally connected, that if the person witnessing the animal is present, has a cell phone, can take a picture, send it to a law enforcement officer as evidence, but essentially it leaves the decision about what to do, whether to act, to law enforcement, which is really consistent with what we have all had in terms of our concerns about just leaving this up to somebody in the public to make that decision. So that's what this bill does. It's a different approach to the problem. If law enforcement can't get there in time and they feel that the person on the scene is acting in good faith, that the animal is truly in distress, then they can authorize that person to go ahead and act. And that's what this bill does. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Do you envision that I would be carrying a cell phone, and that as I place that 911 call to emergency services, that I might be requested to do a video of the scene, and upon witnessing that, emergency management, or who no doubt probably by this time has routed it to the police department, I assume. Anyway, that is the flow of what would lead up to the authorization.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Not necessarily. I think in discussing this with law enforcement, a video could be done, a still photo could be done. It could also be a discussion. It could be questions asked by law enforcement of the person. And that, so it could be a combination of the above. But I don't see this as one size fits all. I think there are people who might not have access to a video cell phone, although I think probably the only person would be Senator French. Actually, Senator Reagan, I think, still has a flip phone. But there are, I think there are circumstances, law enforcement, as you know, they are interrogator. Well, that's not the right word. They are good question askers. And so that's what they do. And they do it very well. And so if they felt they needed video or photographic support for that, then they certainly could ask for it if it's available, but they may feel comfortable acting just on the basis of the history given by the witness on the scene.
That's
Okay,
all.
are there-
Thank you, Senator.
Senator French has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for bringing forward this important legislation. I do have a question. If the police authorize an individual to release an animal, say it's a dog that might attack that individual once out, who'd be liable for that attack financially?
That's a really good question. I believe that because the person is deputized, that actually I would have to ask to get it clear, but they would, once they're deputized, they would be acting on behalf of law enforcement. So it would be similar to if the officer himself or herself had released the animal. I think, on the other hand, that is one of the big concerns of someone acting on their own. And with good questioning and pictures or whatever other supporting evidence, when law enforcement makes that decision, I think, that's one of the reasons why there's been pushback in the past, is that someone making the decision on their own in the setting of that animal emergency may not be thinking about the potential harm to the public, whereas law enforcement would be much more likely to. And I would suspect that they would err on the side of not letting a potentially dangerous animal out unless there was compelling evidence that that needed to be done.
So just to
Follow-up?
follow up, thank you. So I don't see anywhere in here where it says they are deputized.
No, that is not the wording. Let me go to it. The wording is expressly authorized by a law enforcement officer and witnessed by another individual. I put deputized in quotes in my introduction because that's essentially what they're doing.
Okay,
That this is the wording that was provided by Senate counsel to basically, they are acting under the authority of law enforcement at that point.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
are there any further questions? Senator, before you go, I have a question, and it's kind of along the same line as Senator French, and it concerns liability. Usually if you're going to rescue an animal, the animal is in distress, and does the person who's rescuing the animal have a duty to care for that animal once it's taken out of the hot car or the hot vehicle? I don't know if we need to apply some sort of good Samaritan language here that basically says, you're not responsible if the animal dies. You were trying to help the animal. So I didn't know if you had thought about something like that.
Well, that's a great question, and thank you, Madam Chair. One of the problems with these bills, when they keep coming up, is that whole issue of, I don't know if the right word is indemnification, maybe Senator Whitley could tell me, but where, the person is, that if you're acting in good faith, you will not be liable for any actions that you do. That's what these bills have tried to do in the past, and that's where they've run into problems. So in this case, they would be essentially an extension of law enforcement. I would be happy to take that back to law enforcement and ask them, what would be the implication of somebody acting. Would they have to take care of that animal? I would assume that if the animal were not malicious, that the person who cared enough to call the police and try to set it would take care of the animal until the police arrived or until the owner arrived. But that's another good question. I'm happy to try to get an answer for you.
Okay, thank you. I can see this applying in a number of situations because we only think of animals that are in a hot car and they're in distress, but you also have days like today where it's snowing out and an animal is chained outside with no shelter. Is that the kind of a situation that would be covered under this legislation as well?
You know, I'm just looking at the wording, and it uses the words to rescue a confined animal endangered by extreme temperatures. So the definition of confined, it doesn't say restrained, but it does say confined. And then extreme temperatures could be extreme cold or extreme heat.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is some applicability to your question, but I would return back to the fundamental difference between this and prior bills, and that's that this really requires a collaboration with law enforcement before anyone can act. So, you know, if it's a dog that's restrained on a chain and law enforcement says, no, you know, don't let them off until I get there, you're not covered under this bill at that point, and under this, if this becomes statute. So it really does have that ability for law enforcement to be the arbiter here, and really, I think that's what really makes this different from prior bills.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. Are there any further questions? Senator French?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to keep at this, but I thought the title says animals in motor vehicles. So are you telling me this extends to animals outside of motor vehicles?
Very good question. The title, I believe, is the same as last year's. This was intended to be within motor vehicles. That was the original intent. The wording came from, the wording of the actual bill came from Senate Council. So we could certainly provide an amendment that would clarify that if that's the will of the committee.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to recognize Stacy Ober.
Good afternoon. This is
Good
Stacy.
afternoon.
I am the government relations contact for the American Kennel Club here in New England. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, Chairwoman Carson and members of the committee. I'm grateful to speak in support of the work Senator Sherman has done to amend this bill, and we do support Senate Bill 110. The American Kennel Club is a recognized and trusted expert in canine health, breeding, training, and responsible dog ownership. And we believe that dogs should never be kept in or left in situations where their health or safety is in danger. Last session, we did have concerns that we expressed, as Senator Sherman noted, with regard to members of the public using their judgment as to whether or not a dog was in distress and in need of immediate attention. This is law currently in New Hampshire to not leave dogs or animals in motor vehicles. And typically animal control officers, they are trained to document the circumstances and the situation, for instance, the temperature, before determining it's necessary to remove the dog to get medical attention. And our concern was that a layperson who would forcibly enter a vehicle may actually damage that evidence collection in holding an offender accountable for having violated the statutory section, and therefore fail to deter that individual from engaging in the same action in the future. So in our estimation, inserting law enforcement would, in fact, as Senator Sherman noted, provide guidance and direction to that layperson. And from our vantage point, the ideal situation would be to first direct the individual to go to certain lengths to try and identify the owner of the vehicle first, and to walk them through, what steps should be taken before forcibly entering a vehicle, so that a fine could be imposed or charges if that was warranted. This is an improvement on last year's bill, and we're happy to support this amended version this session.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Ober. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll go to Olivia Hammer.
Hi. Okay. Hello, my name is Olivia Hammer, and I'm a 16-year-old student at the Governor's Academy in Massachusetts, but I am a New Hampshire resident. Thank you, Senator Sherman, for inviting me back to support and work toward helping dogs left in a car without proper ventilation and without their owner being there for them. I'm thrilled to be here as we once again approach the warm to scorching days of spring and summer. Please ask yourself, have you experienced this? Have you heard the barking and the yelping? Have you seen the dog in distress or panting? I know this. Dog lovers and owners do not intentionally leave their dogs in a car to harm them. It is most likely an error where they have lost track of time while running errands. But I hope this bill, SB 110, will allow people like me and you to have the ability to do something for a dog that is in distress without experiencing the possible negative repercussions of their actions. Hopefully, this bill will pass to ensure the animal's safety and to protect the citizens. Perhaps most dog owners will be happy that their dog was aided and saved from heat exhaustion, heat stroke, brain damage, and possible death. One can look at our NHSPCA's, which stands for New Hampshire Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals website, for guidance where their hot car safety photo clearly states, and I quote, "If the outside temperature is 75 degrees, the inside temperature of the car is going to be a much higher 118 degrees. This is too hot for a dog to withstand for any length of time. A dog's normal temperature is 101.5 to 102.2 degrees, and anything above that is a risk for the dog, just as it would be for a human. The dog does not have to be foaming at the mouth or showing signs of distress for the police to take necessary action. The brain is already starting irreparable damage between 107 and 108 degrees." End quote. Summers are hot, and as we know, they are getting hotter. According to SB 110, an individual may take actions to rescue a confined animal as long as such actions are expressly authorized by a law enforcement officer and witnessed by another individual. To add, maybe it comes down to a specific protocol that an average citizen can carry out in the parking lot. A list of actions that a citizen can and must consider are contact law enforcement, which we've talked about, seek out another citizen to be your witness if you feel the need to break a window to get into the car to save the dog, and to add to taking photos and videos, maybe screenshot the local temperature for your own added protection. This could be extremely helpful to have the outside temperature documented to determine the car's inside temperature. As I said, according to the NHSPCA, temperatures rise exponentially inside a vehicle, and veterinarians across the country are always trying to save these victims of unintentional neglect. I would know this because my aunt is a veterinarian and she talks about it all the time when we see her, when we go to her office, etc. Leaving an animal in a car occurs in every state across the country. It can be prevented if we act now and make a positive change. Today, people can help dogs and cars. Again, thank you so much for listening to me advocate on behalf of animals across the country.
Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon, Ms. Hammer. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator French?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hammer. I'm sure you've done a lot of research on this. Do you happen to know how many dogs expired from being left in vehicles in New Hampshire last year?
I do not know the specific amount of dogs that were that passed away this year. Or, sorry, did you say last year or this year? I'm sorry.
Last year.
No, I do not know the specific amount in New Hampshire, but I was researching it and I know that 1,800 to 2,000 dogs died last year across the country.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you again, Ms. Hammer, for your testimony. Margaret, are there people in the waiting room who would like to speak?
I do have a hand up from Jeb. I'm not sure if that's Senator Bradley or not.
Okay, well, let's put him through and we'll just have him identify himself for the record.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I just wanted to introduce Section 6 of this bill. It's very simple. I was asked by folks in the that use service dogs to increase the penalty for intentional harm from a misdemeanor to a Class B or Class A felony.
Senator Bradley, excuse me, we are on Senate Bill 110.
Oh, boy.
Okay, not a problem. We'll look forward to hearing from you on, I think it's the next bill.
I apologize.
Not a problem. It's all fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, is there anyone else?
There is not, Senator.
Okay, then let's go ahead and we're going to close the public hearing on Senate Bill 110. Okay. Next, we are going to go ahead and open the public hearing on Senate Bill 60 and recognize the prime sponsor, Senator Gannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Senate Bill 60 is, there's a few amendments. One is just a clarifying language of cannabis and marijuana. I really don't think it's necessary, but there's different parties, different stakeholders, and they all agreed this language was acceptable. So I do offer Amendment 02465. I do think the language in the bill is self-explanatory, but I'll leave that to your judgment. The main intent of this bill was the police chiefs came to me and said they're having a problem with people smoking while they're driving, smoking marijuana, pot, cannabis, and they wanted to make it a little more difficult. So they thought, what are we doing with alcohol? You can't have an open container in the car. So they said, if you're fine, if you're buying from one of our therapeutic cannabis centers and you're coming with a sealed container, that's fine. Just like if you went to a liquor store and you had a bottle with you, it's sealed, that's fine. The problem is when it's unsealed. So they wanted you to have it, once you had an unsealed container, just like an open bottle, put it in the trunk or put it in the furthest place. Senator Whitley probably is sharper than I am on the legal idea of wingspan. So you wanted to keep the driver. It comes in with firearms, with alcohol, with drugs. You want things away from the wingspan of the driver. And so that was the idea here. If you put the alcohol as far as possible, hopefully a trunk, if you're in a truck and don't have that, again, the furthest reach from where you could be, under the back seat or something. So that's the intent, is to make our roads safer. I think the police chiefs are coming after me and they may have more individual examples of the problems that they've been having on the road. But be welcome to any questions I can try to answer.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. And maybe others who are going to testify have a visual on this, but what does a seal look like on these containers? Is it tape? Is it it's not a bottle opener, not a cap. So I need to learn something here.
Sure. And I don't really know. I have never physically seen it. I had the same question when they approached me and they said, when you buy the marijuana at a cannabis center, it's clearly sealed. Like when you buy a pack of cigarettes, there's a, seal on it. So that once that's broken is that what they're thinking of. As long as it's sealed, you'd be okay. Once, sort of like the bottle, once you've taken a couple swigs out of there, it's no longer a sealed container. So once that label has been damaged, they're counting that as been open. And they don't want the driver to have access to an open product.
Thank
But
you.
I think the police after me will give you exact examples of what they're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Senator Gannon.
Thank you, Senator.
Next, we are going to call Michael Holt from the Department of Health and Human Services.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Holt. I'm representing the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm the administrator of the Therapeutic Cannabis Program. The department is not taking a position on this bill, but I wanted to raise a technical issue with the bill and request a technical amendment. And that amendment may be the subject of Amendment 02465 that Senator Gannon mentioned, and that is, so what this bill would do would add the proposed open container prohibition to the alcohol or drug impairment statute, RSA 265A. And it appears in the testimony so far to be written to apply to the general public. However, the statutory cite in the bill itself to the definition of marijuana is to the definition located in the therapeutic use of cannabis law, which is RSA 126X. So if the bill is intended to apply to the general public, then a clearer, more accurate citation would be to the definition of cannabis-type drug or marijuana in the Controlled Drug Act statute, RSA 318B. Citing the definition contained in the therapeutic cannabis law might create confusion as to the bill's applicability and suggest that the bill applies only to therapeutic cannabis patients and caregivers and not to the general public. So that's our testimony. We just request a change to the site to make it clear that it's not applicable only to the therapeutic cannabis patients and caregivers. Those lines are 23 and 24. And again, I haven't seen the amendment, so if this is redundant, then forgive me. I would like to answer the question already that was posed about what these containers look like if they are being dispensed from a alternative treatment center. And program rules do require that all cannabis products be packaged with a tamper-proof seal. Just a little, it's a sticker, shiny sticker on all these products that clearly indicate that they are sealed, and that seal is applied at the manufacturing facility, not at the dispensary location. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Holt. Are there any questions, Senator Gannon?
No, I just wanted to add one thing to my testimony, if I can, after him. But yes, Amendment 02465 is the amendment you wrote, Mike. And so it does. It's the language you wanted for cannabis type drug.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any further questions for Mr. Holt? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Holt. Next we have, let me get to the paper. Andrew Shigori.
Senator Carson, I think, did Senator Gannon, did you want to?
I did. I want to clarify one more thing in the
Okay.
bill that I'm going to amend. It was just brought to my attention this morning that it's a little weak. What the police chiefs wanted was to make sure that this bill is only going to be applicable when the car is being used, or a boat. So it's only when the car or boat is driving, not when it's parked, not when you're at home in your driveway, not when you're parked at your dock, only when the vehicle is in motion.
Okay, so we'll look forward to an amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for Senator Gannon? Okay, seeing none, then let's go to Mr. Shiguri. Oh, Chief Shiguri, sorry.
That's all right. I've been called worse. Thank you. And I know you run late, so I'll be brief. Essentially, I've seen myself a number of cases where this come up recently. And I think it's important to realize this isn't about, marijuana legalization or therapeutic. This is about public safety in vehicles, like the alcohol, how we put that law into place to make sure that it covers those people who might use it yet not get intoxicated when we stop them. This is important when you talk about how marijuana affects the body and affects the ability to operate a vehicle. Especially edibles take a while before they take effect. So if somebody were to take an edible, which is my understanding is over 50% of the market, other states, and I'm not sure about New Hampshire, but probably New Hampshire's falling close. Over 50% of the market is edibles, and edibles tend to take longer to affect the person. And I kind of ran into this not too long ago, and I can't go into too many details because it's a pending case, but somebody could use it and not be under influence when you stop them. They pass sobriety tests, but they could be down the road impaired. It's about public safety. It's about trying to, align this not only with our alcohol laws, but it's similar to other laws in other states. Massachusetts, Vermont, Washington, Oregon, Oklahoma, Nevada, Illinois, Colorado, and California all have very similar laws as this. So, and the other thing that comes up, and I know this is what I faced, and I saw in an article in the Valley News in the Lebanon area, you kind of get some people caught in the middle, the 16 and 17-year-olds. If they have a personal use amount, they're actually transporting and could lose and will lose their license for 60 days because of transporting drugs, even if with a personal use amount. This gives a tool that fits better, I think, what's going on with these people and that get caught in the middle there. And I don't want to take too much of your time because I know you're falling behind a little bit. So I'll take any questions and I do support the amendment that that Mr. Holt had recommended and Senator Gannon has put forth.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon, Chief. Are there any questions for the chief? Senator Gannon?
Chief, just while I have you, a vehicle in motion, would that count once the engine's turned on? Just my own thoughts. It's not a, or like if someone was coming to a boat and they're parked at their dock and the engine's on, is that going to count as in motion?
I think he is. I'm not sure that this applies to boats. It covers OHRVs, but the law primarily focused on is public ways. So private driveways, private residences would not apply. So the cases I typically see is somebody driving down the road though, and they get stopped and so we can work on some language like that if that becomes necessary. But I did believe the actual language in the bill was to have way, so that would kind of cover it. So you're not in private property; you're talking out in the road, and that's what it's about. It's mirrored exactly after the alcohol open container law.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the word that I guess I'd just like to check is the word operating in this, and if you don't recall it, I just scanned it again and I didn't see it, but perhaps that's a word that conveys and translates well to what Senator Gannon has referred to.
Well, it actually says no driver shall transport, carry, possess, or have any marijuana. It's the same thing as the alcohol statute. We're mirroring that, I think, but it doesn't apply to vehicles for hire, charter buses, taxis, which charter buses are already kind of went under the laws. But it's meant to target private vehicles and it's looking at drivers, but it says so transport. the problem you run into, and I know this is how the alcohol came to be, you would stop somebody who has maybe been drinking, but the alcohol's like over by the passenger, and the passenger makes the claim, oh no, he wasn't drinking, it's mine. But for that split second, they pass the beer as you walk up, as you put your lights on or something. When we used to allow driving around with open containers, that's what would happen. Drivers would pass it to the passenger, and the passenger would say, oh, no. So the problem with just saying operating is we have to catch the driver with it. And if the passenger has it, we're no longer going to have any means to deal with it. So that's why it says no driver, and it's no passenger. Because we want to make sure that open containers are kept, bless you, open containers are kept to it out of wingspan, if you will, of the driver. But the problem with, if you just say operating, you're going to have drivers that pass it to the passenger, and they're no longer breaking the law. I mean, that's what we had with alcohol. That's how the law got written for alcohol and the way it is, because it's.
Excuse me. Oh, goodness.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Chief. Margaret, sorry. Excuse me. Are there any folks in the waiting room who'd like to be heard?
So if you could virtually raise your hand if you are wishing to speak, or if you are on a phone, you can press *9. We do not have any others, Senator.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. We're going to go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 60. Next, we are going to open the public hearing on Senate Bill 122. And I believe, let me grab this bill, the bill itself. This is an omnibus bill. So I'm going to it is sponsored by our own Senator French. And so I'm going to go through the different parts of this bill and read them into the record. The first part is LSR 21-0830 relative to impaired driver education program, which is sponsored by Senator French. Part 2 is LSR 21-0191 relative to exemptions from prosecution for victims of human trafficking, sponsored by Senator Ward. LSR 21-0399 relative to bail commissioner fees, sponsored by Senator Gannon. Part 4, LSR 21-0600 relative to guardianship by grandparents, which was sponsored by Senator French. Part 5, LSR 21-0921 relative to immunity from arrest or prosecution for prostitution, seeking medical assistance for reporting certain crimes. This was sponsored by Senator French. And LSR 21-0479, increasing the penalty for harming a service animal and making changes to the membership of the Council on Autism Spectrum Disorders, sponsored by Senator Bradley. So I'm going to go ahead and call Senator French to introduce his part of the first part of the bill, and then we will go through each section and recognize the prime sponsors of those and have them speak before we take testimony from the public. I am going to switch the video off so I can go and blow my nose. So Senator Gannon, would you please recognize Senator French?
Senator French, would you like to speak in your bill, sir?
I would, thank you, sir. For the record, my name is Harold French, and I am still Senator from District 7. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to just do my parts in order?
Sure.
Okay, so I will do part 1, which is relative to impaired driver education program. This section of the bill was brought forward last year and got delayed by our COVID evacuation of the building. So the Merrimack County attorney asked me to bring it forward once again. He thought this was a great idea to start the process. So any person charged with violating any provision of RSA 265A2, A3, in A19 who would be required to complete an IDCMP program if convicted. That's a certified driver's training program. If they are convicted of DWI or DUI, that they could then register for such program after attending a waiving arraignment in the criminal proceeding. He thought this would be good because as part of any sentence for DWI, these people have to take these classes. Oftentimes, the trial, if they go to trial, doesn't takes such a long time that this would speed up the process for them to get their licenses back before the 90-day or 180-day or 1 year revocation that the state imposes. So as a courtesy of the county attorney, I brought this back before us.
Thank you, Senator French. Does anyone have any questions for Senator French on part one? No questions. Jenny, is anyone lined up?
So Senator, I think the plan is we're going to have Senator French introduce all of his sections, and then we're
Okay.
going to have the rest of the senators introduce
I'm
their
sorry.
sections, and then we'll start with public testimony.
I'm sorry, Senator French, go ahead.
So then we skip down to part 4. This is relative to guardianship by grandparents. A while back, we made the order for guardianship over children to extend to mean also grandparents. This changes that and inserts, so it also includes great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. As we all know, if guardianship is needed for young children, it's best to keep it within the family most time. So that's a minor change. Then we'll jump to part 5. And this is relative to immunity from arrest or prosecution for prostitution or seeking medical assistance for reporting certain crimes. Oh, we've heard a lot of testimony over the years that women and men who have been forced or I will say forced into prostitution by and been victims of such, oftentimes worry about reporting crimes due to this. And this will open it up so these men and women who were put into this trade have an avenue of seeking help without prosecution. I believe I brought forward an amendment on this, which we will discuss after. And we'll get into it fully. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Senator Gannon, I'm back, so I will go ahead and take over. Why don't we recognize Senator Ward to introduce, let's see, the second part, which is LSR 0191.
There we go. Okay, I'm Ruth Ward, Senator for the District 8. And this LSR is relative to exemption from prosecution for victims of human trafficking. The purpose and the goal of this bill is to provide exemptions for prosecution for victims of human trafficking. And this bill particularly addresses victims under 18 years of age. If they were victims of human trafficking, direct human trafficking, below the age of 18. They shall not be subject to juvenile delinquency proceedings under RSA 160-B for any otherwise chargeable offense. And it refers back to the previous section when you have chargeable offenses with indecent exposure, prostitution, trafficking in persons under paragraph further up, and conduct chargeable as attempt, conspiracy, criminal solicitation, being an accessory. And then the rest of the bill goes into how do you distinguish, how do the courts handle, and what kinds of evidence are they looking for, and under what circumstances can you be accepted. I also have an amendment to this bill, which essentially deletes the whole bill, and we have a new amendment, which is number 2021-02778. And there were a lot of input from different organizations, particularly the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence and New Hampshire Voters Against Human Trafficking. They had different ideas what ought to be in the bill and how it should be handled. So they worked together, and the amendment is a result of that. And it's pretty much the same, but there are some minor differences. I don't know if you want to take that up now or later.
Senator, why don't you go ahead and talk about the amendment? I believe all the committee members have been given do have access to a copy of the amendment. So if you'd like to go through it, that's fine.
Okay. For example, in the bill, it talks about chargeable offense. And in the amendment, it's very specific. If the conduct was committed as a direct result of being trafficked, provided that the conduct chargeable did not involve an act of violence or a threat of violence, as defined in RSA 625:9 and number 7. Because a couple of people have expressed some concern about it shouldn't be any violence, it should be any offense, it should be some specific offense, and there was some serious offenses, then it probably has to be dealt with differently. And that's pretty much it. And there's some other small things, but I think that essentially is a matter of language. And something that's emphasized throughout is that it has to be a direct involvement with human trafficking. It can't just be something that, you think it was, but it direct is the code word. And I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Senator Ward. Are there any questions for Senator Ward from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome.
Next, we'll go to section 3 with our own Senator Gannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This idea was brought to me by several bail commissioners. One in particular in my town is he's in his mid 70s, and he's getting all these calls every Saturday night and 2, 4, 5 in the morning. And he doesn't want to go out on that second or third call, and there's no one else behind him. It's been at $40 for a significant amount of time, how much they get per case. And so he's getting the call that if you don't show up, they're going to stay locked up for a while. So it seems that, and I have heard from other bail commissioners, that the money at $40, which they do not always receive, is inadequate. I believe, Madam Chair, that you had a summer informational meeting about this type of stuff, where training came out, maybe there's necessary training, and other ideas, I thought it was simplest just to go for $65 rather than have one day of driving further to a different place, different location. So I just put it all in one rather than have a separate gas fee. So it seemed like the simplest, easiest way. But if you have done any research into this beyond that I'm unaware of in other bills, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. I will tell you there are a few bills that are dealing with bail commissioners that are moving through the House and the Senate. So we'll have to get a copy of what the House is doing and see what's going on.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any questions for Senator Gannon? Okay, seeing none, we will go on now to section 6, I believe it is, and recognize Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So pleased to be here. Apologize again for testifying earlier on another bill. I misread my calendar. So very simple. Two pieces of section 6. One is to treat service animals if they are harmed in the same way a canine police dog is treated, with either, depending on the severity, a Class B felony or a Class A felony, from a misdemeanor if they are injured by someone. And the second is the request for the Autism Council, and that was a request of a number of people in the autism community. So I'll stop there. I'm sure there'll be other people to testify on this, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. Are there any questions from the committee on section 6? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Senator. Okay, now we're going to open it up. I believe the first person we're going to hear from is Lynn Charlotte.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Lynn.
Good afternoon, Lynn.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Lynn Chalette, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. I'm here today to speak specifically to two parts of the bill, parts 2 and 5 of Senate Bill 122, and specifically to speak in support of it if it ends up being amended in the way that the sponsors have suggested today. So I'll touch briefly on both parts. I want to thank Senator Ward for her very collaborative engagement, which she referenced in working toward an amendment on this bill. The current trafficking statute ensures that individuals who are trafficked have an opportunity to vacate convictions that are as a direct result of being trafficked. The bill, as originally drafted, removed that. As Senator Ward indicated, this amendment would put back in the requirement that that conviction be directly linked to human trafficking.
Okay.
I apologize. There was a noise in my background. The construction going on in my home. So there are two aspects that I would like to touch on briefly. The importance of putting back in the direct link to human trafficking is that, as drafted, the language would allow an individual who is trafficked and commits a crime to vacate that crime, regardless of whether there is any connection between the trafficking and the underlying crime. Therefore, we are in support of reinserting the language that ensures that the scope of crimes that can be vacated are just those that are linked to the underlying trafficking. We also support the second component of the amendment that provides that individuals who are trafficked do not receive blanket immunity, but instead are provided immunity for nonviolent crimes that they commit. Again, the underlying bill as drafted would grant immunity for any crime that someone who's trafficked commits, and we would not be supportive of vacating a conviction for murder or for sexual assault or for another violent crime.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm just writing this down. Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Chalette. Is there any questions from the committee? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Chalette, I wanted to ask, and I think you can address it in the original bill on page 5 and line 6. There is who to notify in the event that there should be some abandonment of sentence or charges or conviction. And it occurred to me that one of the, or a couple licensing bureaus of the state could be holding records of people having been previously convicted that would have affected a license or licensure. And so I was wondering if it would be friendly enough to add OPLC, Office of Professional Licensure and Certification, and the Department of Education as two entities that would purge that from a person's record. And the point being, you know, obviously we're talking about minors, but these could be instances that come up later in their lives. And in any case, I wanted to put that thought out there. It's a small addition to, I think, what you're trying to accomplish.
I appreciate that question, Senator. Thank you. And it's been a very collaborative effort to get to this amendment, and I would certainly be happy to take it back to the folks who worked on it. I'm also aware there are a few other folks on the call from the statewide collaborative human trafficking task force who might be able to answer that more specifically when they do testify.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator Carson, I also had some input on section 5, but I'm happy to wait if there's another time. That's
No,
more
no,
appropriate for
please.
that.
Just if you're going to speak to a different section, just identify that section. So that makes it easier for Jenny when she's doing the hearing report.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator. I also want to speak in support of the amendment that Senator French referenced for Part 5 of Senate Bill 122. With this amendment, it will ensure that this bill is compliant with a very important federal law that impacts crime victim rights on a national scope. Our request is that this amendment remove the language that provides that a victim who is seeking healthcare services, quote unquote, assist law enforcement in identifying the alleged perpetrator. And I want to take just a minute to talk about why the bill as drafted would violate this federal law. The Violence Against Women Act is a federal statute that grants rights and protections to victims. It also grants funding to states to respond to victims of gender-based violence. And specifically, the version of the Violence Against Women Act that was enacted in 2005 and has subsequently been reauthorized several times requires that states and territories, and this is specific from the federal statute, may not require that a victim of sexual assault participate in the criminal justice system or cooperate with law enforcement in order to be provided with a forensic medical exam, reimbursed for charges incurred on such an exam, or both. The goal of VAWA is to ensure that victims of sexual assault have access to medical care and forensic evidence collection, regardless of whether they come forward, talk to the police, or participate in the criminal justice system in any way. So this bill, by inserting that language back in, violates both the black letter and the spirit of the Violence Against Women Act. So again, we support the amendment that Senator French has proposed to remove that single phrase, and we appreciate the committee's consideration of the very tricky situations that victims of sexual assault who come forward to the emergency room face. So thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hey, thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon, Ms. Chalette. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now I need to find the sign-in sheet. Okay, next we are going to go to Melissa Rodo.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Melissa Bruto. I'm the co-director of the SOAR Institute based in New York. I'm an attorney and longtime advocate for survivors of human trafficking. Sorry, there's some, hopefully that buzzing won't continue. And hopefully everyone can hear me. I have been advocating and representing survivors of trafficking for nearly 15 years. I'm so sorry. Of course, the buzzing had to begin the moment I'm talking, but hopefully everyone can hear me still. I filed and won the first ever vacatur motion in the United States. New York was the first state to have a vacatur bill. In 2010, I filed and won the first ever motion in the country. And since then, I have utilized my expertise on vacatur to help and support bills in many other jurisdictions, including in New Hampshire, where I testified February 4th last year on the expansion of your vacatur bill. And I want to voice my very strong support for Section 2, Part 2 of this bill that would allow all survivors of trafficking, not just minors, which is how it is currently in New Hampshire, but all survivors of human trafficking to be able to vacate all convictions that arose as a result of being trafficked. In my experience, I've represented survivors who've been forced to do a wide variety of crimes, including theft, carrying a gravity knife, so on and so forth. The reality of people who are forced to engage in prostitution or other forms of labor is that they're forced to engage in a wide variety of crimes. And that goes as well for survivors of labor trafficking as well. So I strongly urge passage of Part 2 of this omnibus bill that would really, put New Hampshire as a leader for aiding and supporting victims of human trafficking. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Again, thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Tricia Nuwalu.
Trisha, if you could virtually raise your hand, just because there's no last name, perfect.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Hello, good afternoon, Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Tricia Nuwalu. I am here representing my community and myself. I'm a founding member of a support group here in New Hampshire for sex workers. I support this bill to provide immunity from arrest or prosecution for prostitution when seeking emergency medical services. It happens here in New Hampshire. Sometimes sex workers are lured by unscrupulous people. They are then sexually and/or physically assaulted and desperately need emergency medical care. But when they show up to the emergency room and talk about what happened to them, they end up getting arrested for prostitution. This is wrong. If you are a victim of this type of horrible crime, you should not be afraid to get the health care that you need. People in my community live in fear that this could happen to them after suffering a sexual assault or other injury. They fear that they would not be able to seek emergency medical assistance without being arrested. Some people in our community have shared personal stories of when they were arrested while trying to get care. There are many other stories of victims that have avoided getting the emergency medical attention that they needed for fear of arrest. No person in our great state, regardless of their occupation, should fear arrest when seeking emergency care. Prostitution happens, and it happens here in New Hampshire. Other states that have passed similar laws include Indiana, South Dakota, and Maine, just to name a few. We need to follow suit. We need to protect our most marginalized citizens living in fear. No matter how you feel about prostitution, certainly we can all agree that victims of rape and physical assault deserve health care. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Again, thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll go to Paul Leary.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Paul Leary. I live in Franklin, New Hampshire, and I am a bail commissioner. I applaud and thank Senator Gannon for submitting the bill, but I marked down that I was opposed to the bill, and that's actually a little bit too strong because it was actually Part 3 that I was interested in. And the reality is, unfortunately, $65 is nice, and I won't say I'd like that. But when I look at it in my clientele base, because I'm not a bail commissioner in an affluent area, the people struggle to get the $40 to pay that fee. Over the last 5 years, I've consistently not been paid between 32 and 38% of the bails I do, which comes to about approximately $34,000. So the question is, you may hike the rate, and the question is then, if they're struggling to pay the $40, there will be less people that are actually paying. I think the root thing and the concern that most of the bail commissioners have, and I think the representatives and the senators are aware of it, it is basically to get the bail commissioners paid. We are the only ones in the system that do not get regularly paid, and we rely on the defendant to pay us. The easier way would be for the court to continue to pay each one of us. We remain as independent contractors, and that they collect the bail fee as a court cost and whatever administrative fees it costs to be able to pay the bail commissioners like every 2 weeks in a payroll system. Something like that would simplify it and keep it at $40, because right now in the pandemic, the reality of the people that we actually deal with for a majority of my client base struggle from week to week, paycheck to paycheck, either because of their vices or the fact is they just don't have money to pay all their bills and they don't have any liquid cash to be able to deal with that. So I'd like you to thank you and applaud you for doing that, and I appreciate it, but I think the reality of where we're at now, the bigger thing would be to figure out how to come up with a better system to pay the bail commissioners and let the court collect the fees from the defendants. And I will leave it there because I know you're behind and short on time, but I'm not adamantly opposed to the whole complete bill, but I just wanted you to be aware. And we have spoken to several bail commissioners and they're all of the same feeling. We thank you for thinking of us, but the reality is it would be better if we could figure out a way just to get us paid and get that first rather than hiking it and then creating an even bigger problem that was not the intended consequence. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the testimony. I'm going to rely on Senator French to consider this for us because I think you make a very good point. I wanted to ask you though, because I'm just trying to familiarize myself. Do you wear a uniform when you are delivering notice to a household?
Senator, could you clarify that? Because as a bail commissioner, I don't deliver notice. I don't wear a uniform. And typically I'm either going to a police department or a jail, but right now with COVID-19, we're utilizing remote bailing to do most of it. So
I see. You're just on the release side.
Or I'm the one that basically sets bail at the police department, whether they end up going home on personal recognizance or if they're held because they're either being held in preventative detention or on a cash bail.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome, Senator.
Okay, are there any further questions for Mr. Leary? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Margaret, are there folks in the waiting room who would like to testify?
We do have a hand up, Joe Hannon.
Okay, why don't we recognize Mr. Hannon?
Good afternoon, members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Joe Hannon. I'm speaking for myself today, but I'd like to say that I do work for a lot of different nonprofits that have to do with substance use, specifically with women in substance use and treatment, and also with people that are actively using IV drugs on the streets. So I'd like to start off by saying I do support the entirety of this omnibus bill, but specifically certain sections 1, 2, and 5 are particularly important to me to get across to you today. Number one, as someone who is personally in long-term recovery for over 29 years, I can tell you I have a lot of experience dealing with people who've been charged with DUIs and impaired driving. And I think that having the education program available immediately without consequences to someone's culpability, I think is very important. Like it was said before, the wait can be quite a long period of time, which is, as we should know, getting treatment is more important when the person is ready to get it and not later. The second part, exceptions for victims for human trafficking. I've worked with a lot of people in the street. Specifically, I've seen a lot of young women and a few men who have been in situations where they were afraid to report crimes because of the situations they were in, whether it was a traffic incident, whether they had a personal manager, so to speak, had a lot to do with if they feel safe coming forward. And I think it's very important that we have those exemptions. And I think that also relates a lot to Section 5, the immunity from arrest or prosecution for prostitution. I'm a former legislator myself, and as we all remember, Ronald Reagan said well, if I don't want to get the quote wrong, but someone once said that politics is the second oldest profession, and he was beginning to think it bears a striking resemblance to the first. Well, one big difference is legislators and politicians don't worry about getting arrested if they have to go for emergency medical care. And there shouldn't be a separate class of individuals out there who is afraid to come forward just because they may get arrested for something that is obviously not as serious as being assaulted or injured. So I think this is something that, we don't hear about all the people that don't come forward. I can tell you my wife was as an emergency room physician who was the director of one of the largest sexual assault units in a very large city for several years. And she saw hundreds of victims that came in for sexual assault and rape. But the thing that bothered her the most was the people that would come in and still have problems, but wouldn't report who did it, what happened, or where because of the circumstances, and they were afraid of arrest. So the fear of coming forward, I think, is something that can keep people from getting treatment in the first place sometimes. And I think that we have to have this legislation to protect people and to make them feel safe when they have nowhere else to go but the hospital. And obviously we want them to go to law enforcement when possible. But if they're afraid to even get medical care, how can they ever feel safe coming forward to get legal care or protection from the system? So I implore you to pass the entirety of the omnibus bill, specifically those sections, and I'd be happy to take any questions. And it's great to see all your faces. I haven't seen you in a while. So I'm in my pajamas, you can't tell, but
well, thank you. Thank you, Joe. It's always good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon, Mr. Hannon.
Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
You too. Margaret, is there anyone else?
We do have Brian Strong.
Okay, let's put Mr. Strong through.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Strong. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brian Strong, and I am a lieutenant with the New Hampshire State Police and the commander of the Special Investigations Unit. One of our unit's responsibilities is to investigate human trafficking cases. We currently have a member of our unit assigned to the Homeland Security Human Trafficking Task Force. While reviewing this proposed bill, SB 122, there appear to be two areas of concerns that I believe are addressed in RSA 633:7, which is the trafficking in persons. Now, I did hear the testimony of the senator introducing the bill, and it looks like she made some amendments to this bill that I don't have. So my comments may be mute if she's already looking to make those changes. I just don't have that. So I apologize. I don't have the current amendment. But my testimony will be real quick and brief anyways, just to cover it. The first area of concern with this bill, it looks to remove the word direct from the direct result of being trafficked, as noted in section 2, paragraph, I believe 6. And I believe Senator Wood said they would be adding the word direct back in, and I just don't have that copy. The second area of concern, I believe, was probably addressed as well. It looks like this bill would give blanket immunity to individuals who commit violent crimes, even if they are victims of human trafficking. This is something that law enforcement can't stand behind, to give or allow an individual blanket immunity to commit violent crimes against a person. Under the current statute, human trafficking victims can already vacate nonviolent crimes. I don't believe this bill should allow victims immunity or to vacate violent crimes against a person or persons, as outlined in 625:9. I believe she probably already covered both of those, so I apologize for going into it, but those were the notes I had prior to hearing her amended bill. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Lieutenant. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you again. Anyone else, Margaret?
There's one other hand up, Jennifer Crowell.
Okay, why don't you put Ms. Crowell through?
Hello,
Good-
everybody.
Good afternoon, Ms. Crowell. Could you please identify yourself for the record?
Of course. My name is Jennifer Kroll, and I'm responding on behalf of your bill, the 122 with the service dogs. I work for Granite State Independent Living, and 12 years ago I had an accident in which paralyzed me. So I live every day in a wheelchair and advocate for myself through many obstacles. But one is my service dog Journey, who has been there for me through thick and thin, not just emotionally and physically, but as a replica of who I am and what I believe in. He has not just been a best friend, but he has also helped me in many ways when it comes to what I've trained him to do, which has taken many years, a lot of financial expenses. And without him, I believe I would not be able to be working. I don't believe I'd be able to be out as much as I am out in the public and getting around and being able to go to places by myself. I also don't believe I'd be able to be living on my own if I did not have him in my life doing the things that he's trained to do. And the biggest is dropping things. I drop everything. And I am not able at all to get out of my wheelchair. I do have grabbers, but those grabbers also get dropped as well by accident. And if it wasn't for him, as I was just saying, I would not be able to be living my life so independently. And I think it is extremely important for people to understand that service dogs are just as important as a dog in the law enforcement, a dog that works with the Army, with the military, with smelling out bombs, whatever the aspect may be. So I just really want to emphasize, I never expected for my life to turn the way it did. And it happened with less than seconds. But without him in my life, I would not be able to be so independent. And I just strongly would like to emphasize that to all of you. And I greatly appreciate you listening. And I'm very happy that I got to listen in on this. It's my first time. That is how I'd like to end.
Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Margaret, do we have anyone else?
There is another hand, Jeff Dickinson.
Okay, let's put Mr. Dickinson through.
Great, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Mr. Dickinson. Please identify yourself for the record.
Will do. My name is Jeff Dickinson. I'm the Advocacy Director at Granite State Independent Living. I live in Franklin, and I am here testifying in support of Part 6 of this bill. I just, not to go over the same ground that Ms. Crowell did, I'll just give you a little bit of a history of why we had asked for this bill to be introduced. Over the years, I have had 3 service dogs since the late 90s. And Senator Carson and Senator Whitley probably remember my last one, named Peaches, who was at the State House for hearing elsewhere many a time. And I currently have a new dog, relatively new, named Aspen, who also was trained to assist me. So service dogs have always been a little bit of a pet project for me, legislatively and otherwise. And over the years, I have talked with many other folks with service animals who have told horror stories of having their dogs harassed, harmed, and oftentimes to the point where either because of physical injury or sometimes something more psychological, the dog hasn't been able to work again. That represents a severe hardship for anybody. These are guide dogs, service dogs. They're animals that literally make it possible for the folks with disabilities who handle them to be able to function and live out in the community. And so upon realizing that state law basically did not treat them with an equal level of importance than law enforcement animals, it just occurred to us that this would be a way to protect these very valuable and important animals. They have clearly a very big emotional and physical benefit for folks. They also represent a very large financial expenditure. And a lot of that is expended by organizations and nonprofits that raise money to assist folks with that. But a lot of it's borne by the consumers themselves. I know that with my dog Aspen, I wound up paying the organization somewhere around $2,000. But the cost to train her, if you added it all up, was probably more like $20,000 by the time it was all said and done. So anyway, our feeling just is that by making the laws protecting service dogs match those that protect law enforcement dogs, that it better reflects the importance of these animals and the possible negative impact on folks who aren't able to use them because somebody has done something to harm them. And that was why we asked Senator Bradley to help us introduce legislation around that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Dickinson. I'm glad you've got a new dog. Hopefully we're going to be back in Concord and we'll have an opportunity to meet Aspen. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony this afternoon.
Thanks for the opportunity. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Margaret, anyone else?
We do have two hands up.
Okay.
Trixie Lefebvre and Nancy Holmes.
Okay, why don't we put Ms. Lefebvre through? Good afternoon, Trixie.
Oh, hold on for just a moment. I'm trying to bear with me, please.
Yep, we're here.
Good afternoon. Okay, I'm
Good
sorry.
afternoon. That's okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Trixie Lefebvre. I'm a bail commissioner from Londonderry, and I wanted to mirror Senator Bail Commissioner. First of all, thank you all committee members for taking my call today. I wanted to mirror what Bail Commissioner Leary had said, is that my opposition that I noted earlier today before the start of the meeting was in opposition to Section 3 for the rate hike. While I do certainly appreciate the thought behind it, with the present bills we have coming before the House as well as this one, we need to focus, the legislature, we're hoping will focus more on getting us paid, and then possibly in the future, the consideration for a rate increase. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that it was Section 3 only that I was opposed to.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Are there
You're
any
welcome.
questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's put through the last speaker.
Hello, this is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Just barely, it's a little choppy, but please identify yourself for the record.
Sure, my name is Nancy Holmes. I'm coming to you today from New Boston, New Hampshire. And I want to speak against Section 6 in the bill, not any of the rest of it. I sent in written testimony, which I included some of my feelings on why I don't think you can equate the service dog to a police dog. I wanted to emphasize that a little bit more for you all. Police dogs are very carefully selected. They're temperament tested. They're highly trained. They're tested again and again before they're considered to be suitable for the purpose for which they are trained. When they are in service, they go through continuing training. Service dogs can also come out of a situation like that where they're highly trained and presented, but many of them nowadays are not. I happen to read the pet classifieds for fun and entertainment, and day after day I see people requesting to adopt a dog to be trained as a service dog. It takes a specific temperament and type of trainability in a dog to be able to make it suitable to be an actual service dog. However, we cannot legally ask about the training of the dogs in question. You can't legally even ask what they do for the owner. They're a service dog, and I believe there's federal rules on what can and cannot be asked. I don't believe that in all cases the level of training rises to that of a police canine. I strongly believe in having helper dogs. My dearly past Wolfhound Mastiff cross was excellent for me in helping me stand up and sit down, and I took her out in public even though I knew she was not dog friendly. This is an issue with a service dog. I would never have called her a service dog. She just was my helper. I was quick enough and alert enough to always maintain the safety of other people's dogs, even when they came up and jumped in my dog's face. However, that doesn't mean I feel that she would rose anywhere near the level of a trained police dog in terms of her training. There isn't any certification for a service dog. There are some great organizations out there that produce some. I know in my written testimony, I mentioned the service dog that came up and actually attacked the Great Dane I was walking at the time and dragged its blind owner, because this was a guide dog, dragged its blind owner halfway across Government Center in Boston, which if you're familiar, it's a pretty big space, to get up in behind my dog to grab it. And I did mention in that, I want to make clear, it was not the service dog that bit me. I put my fist in my dog's mouth to keep it from retaliating, because I knew the value of the service dog to that owner. But I don't believe until there is a method of determining a dog is trained to be and temperamentally suited to be out in public with its owner in all circumstances, I don't believe this should go up to the same level as a police dog. And the other thing was that in our law on the police dogs, the person has to know that the dog in question is a police canine. And you cannot tell that with a service dog out in public. Yes, some people do harnesses and leashes to say so, but not everybody, and it's not required. And I think it's illegal. I think we found it was illegal to even require somebody to do that. So while I'm all in favor of service dogs, I don't think you can say in every case the level of training and the level of control an owner has over that service dog rises to the level to make this a felony offense, particularly if the service dog is the one that instigates the problem. So I'll let you go back. I just didn't want to let it all be, oh, all dogs are great. I think dogs are great, but not all dogs are suitable for all services. And I think the law should reflect that. Be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Holm. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Anyone else, Margaret?
Jeff Dickinson, who has his hand up again.
All right, we'll let it, he would like to testify again. Let's hear from him. Good afternoon again, Mr. Dickinson.
Hi there. I'm sorry to drag this out. And I don't know if it's inappropriate for me to address some of what Ms. Holmes said or not. And if it is, tell me so, and I will not do that. But if it's okay, there are just a few things I wanted to point
out. What we don't like to see is a lot of the going back and forth and back and forth. If you have additional testimony that you'd like to give us, that would be fine.
Yeah, I just there are two things I would point out, kind of legal things. One is that the language in the bill that's proposed talks about somebody who willfully causes harm to an animal. I think that helps alleviate the concern of some random altercation that could happen out in public between someone's dog and another dog. There's that element of willfulness that's written into the law. The other thing is, there is a definition of what a service dog is. And it's under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it basically is a dog that has been individually trained to assist a person with a disability. It is true. You can't ask a lot of detailed questions about the person's disability or about what the dog does, but you are able to ask those two questions. Are you a person with disability? Is this dog trained to assist you? The other concern that's raised is these animals that people say are service animals and don't act like them at all. And the fact of the matter is, the ADA also allows employers and places of public accommodation a way to exclude animals that are service animals, but that are not acting appropriately. So sometimes I think there's an idea that an employer or a public accommodation can't do anything about a dog who's a service dog if it's misbehaving. And the fact of the matter is that's not the case. So that was all I wanted to address. And I'm sorry for taking more time.
That's okay, Mr. Dickinson. Senator French has a question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Maybe you can clarify this for me. Are service dogs registered anywhere?
There is no national or regional or state registration. A lot of them are trained by organizations that adhere to standards by the International Assistance Dog Association. But it also is possible within the law to train your own service animal. And that animal may or may not fit all the criteria of that organization.
So follow up. Thank you. So it would be at the owner's own opinion whether their dog was a service dog or not when it comes to enforcing this law, correct?
No, I would argue that that's not the case. The fact is there is a definition. We could discuss whether it is specific enough under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But I can't just claim my dog is a service animal if they're not trained to perform a task to assist me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any further questions for Mr. Dickinson? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else, Margaret?
There is not.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. on Senate Bill 122 for today. We are not going to be executing any bills. We're going to try to get to that next week. So I would like a motion to adjourn for today.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Senator Whitley. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, seconded by Senator Khan. Okay, we will call the roll. Senator French.
Senator French says yes.
Okay, Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Whitley.
Yes.
Senator Khan.
Yes.
And Senator Carson. Yes. Thank you all for your attention to the public hearings this afternoon, and special thanks to Margaret and Jenny for your help this afternoon. See you all. Well, we'll see you on Thursday on session. So everybody have a great couple of